Hey guys, it is week 439. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for the good feedback, the positive feedback on the horror essay from 1982. It did take a lot of work, and I don't really read those comments on the channel or anything, so I just want to make sure I am reading them, and I do appreciate it. I don't know if 83 will be as good because I haven't found my story yet. You know how that is. You kind of watch a year and you kind of reflect on what you see and what you already know and all those kind of things like that. But 83, I dove into it. I already have one of my special videos recorded and everything like that. So we'll see how it ends up going. But let's jump into the... Oh, I should mention it is Wasteland Eve. It is the Thursday before Cinema Wasteland. So if you see me there, although it will be post, anytime you see me there, if you want to say hi, come up and say hi. I'll chat a bit. Usually on Saturday and Sunday, I'm a little sleepy. Anybody makes a joke, Mrparka, Sleepy Dave, always completely, almost like two different people. Yeah, let's hop into the reviews. The first one up is a doozy, and I can't believe this is on 4K, but it makes me very happy, and this is from Arrow Video. This Abel Ferrara's fantastic. Rape revenge flick, Miss 45, made in 1981. I would call it horror Jason, more exploitation, but it's one of the best of its genre. When you think that genre, you think Last House on the Left, you think Thriller, A Cruel Picture, you think I Spit on Your Grave, and you think Miss 45. I think those are kind of the big four. This is one of the best movies of its kind. I think it's one of the quintessential New York movies, as Abel Ferrara's films typically are, but the 4K looks fantastic. The soundtrack is one thing that always stood out to me, and it pops in this new version for sure. And Zoe Lund turns in a wonderful performance just at 17 years old here. It's really kind of daring that they would even put her in the movie. I don't think that it would necessarily be the casting choice they'd make now. Yeah, this one even had got remade unofficially in 1982 by the girl in I think it's the girl with the gun, which is a Taiwan remake. It's not quite as gutsy as this one, or it kind of pulls back a little bit of its punches. But I find it interesting that it had kind of a semi unofficial remake, and it kind of in the vein of like the Egyptian Rocky Horror Picture Show or the Korean Let Sleepy Corpses Lie, which aren't necessarily remakes, but maybe they are. It's hard to say where the laws float in there, or who owns ownership and all that kind of stuff like that. Yeah, so Miss 45. It's kind of a simple story, but it means a lot to people. I think people have, I don't want to say projected on it, but I think that it's a really well-made movie, and I think it says a lot. And Abel Ferrara is working with his typical writer, Nicholas St. John, who wrote a lot of his great pictures, including Bad Lieutenant, which is one of his most powerful films. And what happens is Zoe Lund is pretty much a mute. She's deaf, mute. And she works as like kind of a seamstress in a small New York office with some other girls, and kind of a weird owner, kind of a dirtbag. And one day on her way home, she gets raped by actual director Abel Ferrara, and she goes home only to be assaulted again by a would-be kind of robber. She ends up getting the upper hand and killing him. And after that, she sort of kind of snaps. Her nosy neighbor is always there with her dog, and the next one is she goes to cut up the body and hide it, and she kind of has a run-in with another guy who's trying to pick her up, and she kills him. And after that, it's kind of a free-for-all. She goes out at night, a la Charles Bronson Death Wish, and instead of having, a voice of vengeance like Bronson or whatever the kind of revenge he wants to get on just society, or taking the law into his own hands to kind of make up for what has happened to his family, she just targets men. And she sees all men as bad and evil. And they do a really great job here in the New York City when she's walking down the streets and they have all the catcalling and stuff. It's just insane. Like, you see, like, the New York streets are perfect in a lot of the 80s films. Or if you have, like, Kevin Vander Rick, how you say his name, from Basket Case, walking down the 42nd Street, or Maniac, or even New York Ripper has some of that stuff too, with the fingerless guy walking, with the missing finger guy walking down the streets. And the way just portrayed in New York is, I think that Abel Ferrara does a really good job, and I feel like it's a little bit less sleazy. Although it's sleazy and dangerous, it does seem like realistic too, and sometimes they go a little overboard, if you ask me, from what I can tell, but who knows. Saying that, I think that the picture quality looks great. I think that this movie, it just gets better with age. And I think, like I said, I was talking about people like looking through this and exploring it, and they find these themes in here, of somebody taking the law into their own hand. And I think that Zoe Lund she's a cult figure. Just her appearance, the way she dresses throughout the film, especially at the end at the Halloween party, she has that nun outfit, which is just perfect. that silent nun. It also kind of screams out to nunsploitation films of back in the day. It's just I don't know why, but it just all came together in kind of the perfect thing. And the film before this that Abel Ferrara did was Driller Killer, which is also a popular horror film. And I've never been a huge fan of Driller Killer. I don't hate it. It's just not Miss 45 or Bad Lieutenant or King of New York, which I think are absolutely fantastic films. And I think Abel Ferrara's career is a pretty solid one for sure. He's really good director, and I think stuff like Fear City and China Girl aren't really spoken about as much as they should. I think it's Fear City and China Girl, both really good films. The Funeral is a good film. His Body Snatchers are good films. So I mean, he always did a really strong job on his films. I would say an underrated overall director. And I'm kind of trailing on here, but I remember somebody on Facebook years ago posted that Greg Araki, Abel Ferrara, and Wes Craven said they're all similar. They only made one good movie or something like that, and the rest are crap. And I'm just like, fucking nuts. Fucking nuts. Whoever said that was just like such... It's one of those people that like watch all the movies but never like anything. And so I'm like, why are you just wasting your fucking time with your life then? But as far as the special features, we do have a bunch here. I've covered Miss 45 a couple times, I think, on my channel. So it was an old Alamo Draft House DVD, and this is a major improvement in the quality. There's stuff that I was seeing that I never saw before, I don't think, in the streets and stuff. I love reading the signs in New York. And, the one thing I did notice is how quirky a lot of the side characters are. Of course, we have the lady in the apartment who's kind of expected. She's almost like out of a different movie. She's like out of Eating Raoul or something like that, just an annoying neighbor. But all the other side characters are, weird and strange too. And my favorite scene in the movie, I think it's just one that always gave me chills, and it's really disturbing, is the scene where she meets the guy who's, I can't think of the actor's name, he's a character actor, he's in a bunch of stuff, he's very good, and he's kind of ranting to her in the bar about, my wife, my girlfriend, she's cheating on me, sleeping with another woman, and he goes into this big spiel, and then it kind of does a nice little transition where you hear the music. It's just like, I think it's actually just a hard cut where they're sitting on the bench now talking, and it's kind of the continuation of the conversation, and you see from behind that they're isolated, and it's just looking like that. And he's saying stuff where she might even have some mild sympathy for him. Maybe she found the one halfway decent guy, or she has some sympathy for him, although he doesn't sound exactly like the best guy in the world or anything like that. But then he says something that's really messed up, and she pulls her gun out. She pulls her 45 out, and it doesn't go off. But the guy finishes the job, and he looks at her with that look, and I just thought that was just such a disturbing moment, powerful moment. And I think it's one of the best scenes ever filmed for one of these kind of movies. This a great, great scene. And I know that when you watch Dertuskin, which is years later by Jörg Buchardt, I feel like that scene was directly lifted, although the reasoning for killing yourself on there is a little different, or maybe he was just calling her bluff. Whatever it is, it's an incredibly intense, disturbing scene. And the ending is very powerful as well with the one-spoken dialogue. As far as the features are concerned, we have a handful here of new ones. Brand new audio commentary by Alexander Heller Nicholas, author of Rape Revenge Films, A Critical Study, and called... So this is a good commentary. She talks a little bit about this being an exploitation movie, which it is, and she talks about other rape revenge films, and it's a good, solid commentary. I've heard her before, and she never really does a bad job. I can't really find any complaints I have myself. Miss 45, The Voice of Violence, a new featurette with film critic B.J. Colangelo. This one's very poetic. It's almost like I don't want to say prose or something like that, but it shows a lot of it. It's really well edited, and it's kind of like talking about the film and the powerful stuff in it. It's pretty good. And then we have Where Dreams Go to Die, a new featurette with film critic Kat Ellinger. Also, she mentions other films that took place in New York and Paris and stuff like that, and like taxi driver scenes, and does a good job as well. Overall, sometimes when you watch all the features, they kind of bleed together when they're talking and covering a lot of the same things here and there. But enjoyable special features, archival interview, of course, with Abel Ferrara, who's a madman, archival interview with composer Joe Dilla. Also, interesting, I remember covering that for Alamo Drafthouse release, archival interview with creative consultant Jack McIntyre. And then we have Zoe XO, a 2004 film directed by Paul Rockman, and Zoe Rising, a 2011 short film directed by Paul Rockman as well. And these are really depressing. One's with her husband or her ex-husband, and one's with her mother. And you get kind of a look at Zoe as a young person, and you kind of get into her ideas. And everybody kind of paints her as a very highly intelligent person, but a troubled person. And often highly intelligent people are troubled people. They just don't see the world the same way, or maybe they see things that other people do not see. But she seemed like a very intelligent artist that could have had a very promising, career in the arts or a career anywhere else. It's unfortunate that she died so young of a heroin overdose. I think in the late 30s, early 40s, her age, I mean. But yeah, just a very depressing story, and I think that these are kind of done in an artistic way. But anytime you're talking about somebody who died tragically, and you have somebody who personally knows them talking, that's always something that is very emotional for me. I don't particularly like talking about people that I've known that died, especially if I know them well. It's just something that it's an easy way to get like at the core of somebody's their life and stuff, and it's just it's hard to do, right? So these films, I think, are probably just kind of love letters to her, and maybe just a good way to remember her and honor her, and just give some people an outside look at maybe pieces or parts of that person that they didn't see. But overall, good stuff. Theatrical trailer, image gallery, reversible sleeve featuring original newly commissioned artwork by Sister Hyde, perfect bound collector's book featuring new writing by Robert Lund, previously on-scene photographs by Zoe Lund, plus select archival material including writings by Kira Janice and Brad Stevens, double-side fold-out poster featuring original and newly commissioned artwork by Sister Hyde. So, yeah, a great release from Arrow. And I remember back in the day, I remember somebody had the guy, he's since changed, Josh Nelson, as I think it was, on Scream Factory on their podcast. And they're like, oh, they offered us Miss 45, and they didn't, I knew Scream Factory didn't want to do it, so we passed it. And then we got this 4K edition of freaking Miss 45, the rosaries with the bullets. That's such great imagery. But yeah, from Arrow. It's just, we've come a long way where at times they would be like, well, we don't want to touch that movie. That's too taboo. And now it's just like being celebrated as it should be. Dangerous, good cinema with a lot to dive into. And they're also talking in the features too, which I appreciate, because so many times, and I don't mean that this isn't in the movies, but people project things that aren't there. And sometimes it's they could be there, but a movie means to what it means to people. But you can see that they do. This is an exploitation film as well, so that is the truth. But there is a lot, oftentimes, that exploitation movies are the first ones to push boundaries or say stuff that other films don't. So there's also that. Anyways, great release from Arrow Video. Looks spectacular. I should mention it does have a HDR10 compatible Dolby Vision. There we go, and lossless mono audio. You don't have any 5.1, but I don't think this movie's ever had it. Fantastic soundtrack too. Loud and hits the right moments, and amazing slow motion at the end. Beautiful massacre at the fucking end of the movie. Miss 45, great movie. Okay, another one from Arrow here, and this is the double disc release here of 3 and 3 Extremes, 2 early Asian horror anthologies. So we'll talk about 3 first now. These are both 3 Extremes. I think in America, this is kind of a weird release history here. We'll talk about 3 first, but I think that 3 Extremes was released first, and then they went back and released 3 Extremes 2, but that was actually 3 in America. I think Tartan Asian Extreme kind of released those movies, but we'll talk about 3 first. And this was kind of the Park Chan was a producer director, and he wanted to kind of bring together all these Asian directors from all around the world, and he thought it'd be a great kind of a great collaboration, because people really that go see movies, these are the art films in other countries, but regular movies are just kind of the for their country, they're the commercial ones, but they're looked at as art films. So people go see the Hong Kong movie in Hong Kong, and they'd be seeing a Thailand movie and a Korean movie at the same time. So he thought that was a great idea. So he put together these 3 directors, and he had to direct one of the episodes because somebody fell out. But we'll talk about the 3 stories here in 3. The first one is Memories by the director of I Saw the Devil, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, The Tale of Two Sisters. And he was prepping, I think, A Tale of Two Sisters on this, and he had never directed a horror film. So he thought, let me just dive in and do a short first and get my feet wet, and this would be a great way to do it. So the first one in here is called Memories, and it's a really well shot, kind of structurally told a little different in here, where a guy's wife has gone missing and he has an awful feeling that she's lost, and we kind of see his wife kind of wander around almost in like a ghostly kind of weird state, and it cuts back between both of them until we have a final reveal. Of course, you're waiting for the reveal. I wouldn't say that the reveal is anything, oh my god, but I think its structure, its acting, the way it's shot, and the way it's done is good enough to be interesting. Plus, it's made by a fantastic director. Tale of Two Sisters is also a great movie, and a good precursor. This is a good precursor to that as well. There's one scene in here that I thought was, oh wow, that is horrifying, where we kind of have the main guy who lost his wife, and he's talking to kind of the night guardsman at their apartment building, and the guy says, this place is haunted, There's one thing that happened to me, and he starts telling the story. We have a quick flashback where we kind of see his story through his eyes, and we have this kind of night guardsman scanning a flashlight, and we see just a face in the darkness, assassin, the way it's cut, the way it's done. It's just a really great way to scare the shit out of you. So I thought this was a good short. The next one's called The Wheel, and this director I'm not super familiar with. I don't think I've seen any of his films, but it's a Thailand movie. And Thailand has films. A lot of films that I've seen are, the 80s ones or 70s ones. They're like giant crocodile kind of films, things like that. But they do have a rich kind of thick mythology too, and I'm kind of always interested in the Asian mythologies and stuff and the films from India to Indonesia to Hong Kong to Japan and Korea. They're also different, but they have somewhat of a same flavor to a certain extent. I guess if you were to compare like a lot of the European countries too, they all have kind of a little similar flavor, although they're pretty different all at the same time. There's certain regions and how they kind of change their mythology. But this one follows a story of kind of a puppet maker, and they do these elaborate dances. I don't want to say maker, but these puppets are kind of owned by the person, and they do these elaborate dances and these big kind of things, and they're well respected in the community and they're vastly important. But when that person dies, those puppets go with them. If somebody else takes them, they will be haunted and cursed by these puppets. So what we have here is this man dies and his puppets are left behind, and I think a relative of sorts comes in, or maybe an in-law, and he comes in and he's going to take over the protege of that guy, and he starts kind of wanting to collect the puppets, although it's obviously cursed. And what continues to happen is that guy's son is starting to get jealous of the new protege who's starting to move in on his girl, and there's some really shady underdealings, and really well shot, really creepy imagery, kind of beautiful stuff. And what's funny is, like, just explaining that simple story right there, I'm sure like you're like, how's that stretch out to 45 minutes? But the way the story's done, the way it unfolds, I think is well done. It does have some pretty I'd say slightly disturbing imagery for horror fans, not overly disturbing, not compared to something like Three Extremes or anything. But yeah, I think this one's solid. It's good, and it's also interesting to see like a well-crafted, expensive movie from Thailand. The ones I usually see are kind of cheap, kind of on the cheaper side, like Crocodile or something wild like that, or like those movies that just are so low budget and quality so low. This is a very well done professional movie and interesting, good stuff. And the final story is, of course, is it going to blank on me here? This one is actually done by Park Chan. I hope that's his name. I hope I mess up his name and I sound like an idiot, because he's the producer director I'm not super familiar with. He did a film called Comrades, which was made in '96, and it's more of a love kind of romance story. So he wanted to kind of do a horror film as well, and he kind of had to dive into here. And this one has Eric Tang in it, and I know him from like Till Death Do We Scare or Fatal Vacation, which is a totally underrated Hong Kong movie. But yeah, he plays this police officer, and him and his young boy, they're kind of the only two. The wife is out of the picture, and they move into this big giant apartment complex. Often those apartment complexes you see in the 90s Cat 3 Hong Kong films like Red to Kill or anything along the lines, or Underground Banker, where there's these giant towering apartment buildings where they have shared living spaces like bathrooms and kitchens and along those lines, and they're moving in and everyone else is moving out. There's only one other person there, and he has his wife, and they're kind of isolated here, and you kind of learn that this guy's wife has dead, and he's been kind of feeding her these ancient Chinese medicines and all these kind of things like that, and been very quiet and very isolated. There's this strange little girl going around that catches the attention of the young boy, so that adds this other element and everything like that. And before long, the young boy disappears, and the police officer blames this guy, and he kind of is kidnapped and held hostage by him. And we're wondering, is this guy's ancient medicine actually have some truth to it? But it's really driven by the love he has for his wife and the dedication he has for his wife. And the ending is really powerful, really sad, and interesting as well. There's a really crummy CGI shot with a traffic accident, but that's just a product of its time, unfortunately. Overall, really solid 3 shorts in here. And I will give the features. I have to read them to remember all of them. I did watch most of them, if not all of them. Cross Pollination, Horror Part 1, a brand new interview with producer Going Home director Peter Ho Sun Chan. And he talks a little bit about getting this project together, why he wanted to do this project, why he had to direct one. Recalling Members, a brand new interview with Memories director King Jee-woon, of course, the director of I Saw the Devil in this one. And he talks about, kind of having a stepping off point in the horror in this one. Making Memories, a brand new interview with Memories cinematographer Hong Ko Proy. Terror Without Borders, newly edited interview with Peter Ho Sun Chan, and that it looks like it was filmed years ago, but it's edited and makes it look new with new footage and everything like that. I mean, new remastered footage from the movie, filmed in 2005. Between Life and Death, a newly edited interview with Going Home star Eugenia Yan, filmed in 2004, and I can't remember. Yeah, she speaks in English as well, and talks about making the thing, having to play dead, and how hard it was. And not actually, the hardest part was not being emotional for the other actor when you're supposed to play dead. But having to look somewhat alive to give that moment of suspense that you might wake up. Peter Hoson Chun, Cinema Without Borders, an archival interview. King Jee-woon, Memories and Beyond the Grave, an archival interview, making a feature, which I think is about 15 minutes. So there we go. It's the first one, 3, which I had never seen. I know people, 3 extremes, but I never rolled 3 going home. Nobody really talks about that one, and it's definitely well worth your time. Good stuff, too. It looks great, too. Sounds solid. You got 5.1 mix in all 3 of their native languages. I think it's Korean, Cantonese, and Thai. So okay, we're going to talk a little bit about 3 Extremes now. Boom, this is the one that kind of circulated in the States and made a lot of buzz. This movie was pretty popular among horror fans at the time. So they decided to go back to it and do 3 more. This time we have Fruit Chan from Hong Kong. We have, oh geez, how am I going to forget Park Chan-wook from Korea and Takashi Miike from Japan. So we put Japan in for Thailand. And Park Chan does not direct this time, and we do not have a Thai film. So I don't remember exactly. Oh, the order is kind of wild because Dumplings is the infamous one. Everybody talks dumplings. It was actually made into a feature-length movie. It was shot at the same time, and they cut this back to put it in here, and then they had a feature-length, which is not on this disc, which is kind of a miss on this one. It would have been great to have the feature-length of Dumplings on here as a 3rd disc or a bonus disc or something along those lines. Hopefully they release it as well. So Fruit Chan is, he's kind of, I don't want to say independent because, like he says in the interviews, they don't really make independent movies in Hong Kong. There's no real selling point, but he makes his movies in a strange way, and I'm not super familiar with. I know his name, like Made in Hong Kong and things like that, but Dumplings is infamous for a good reason. So Ba Ling is in here, and she's been in a lot of films. She's an odd actress, honestly, a pretty wild actress, kind of has that reputation for being pretty wild. And the lead in here, I think, was more from comedies. She's not an actress I'm familiar with, and they talk about her being in this and all that kind of stuff like that. But so we have here is a classic tale. She's been an old actress, and she goes to she's aging, and she doesn't like how she's aging. Her husband seems to be losing a little bit of interest. He's kind of a high roller, makes a lot of money, and he's kind of, out of town a lot, and possibly, cheating on her, all that kind of stuff like that. So she wants to remain youthful, and this is a timeless story, right? We have the Rejuvenatrix or any of those movies where we have the characters willing to do anything to remain young and beautiful forever. Hell, it goes all the way back to Elizabeth Bathory, where she's slitting virgin girls' throats from the village and bathing in their blood. So Countess Dracula, all the stories on that one as well. But or Dorian Gray, another one like that. People just want to remain young and beautiful forever. So she kind of visits this lady who has an ancient, secret in mythology here. And it turns out the dumplings that they're making, and I don't know, this is not really a spoiler because I think it's done right away, are embryos or fetuses, aborted fetuses, or taken from the mothers, and she goes to hospitals and picks them up, and rich people come there and pay for them and eat them in dumplings. And of course she gets hooked on it. She starts to look younger, feel younger, vitality, and she actually ends up getting pregnant, which she hasn't been able to for years. But there's some complications that happen that are pretty disturbing, and I think it's beautifully well shot, it's beautifully well acted, the dialogue's great, the story unfolds really well, and I think the ending is what people remember because it's really freaking twisted and nasty, but a great one. And now people think, oh, it's extreme. And then yes, the subject matter is extreme. And they do talk about this in the features. They could have went further. They could have, if it was like known to be a Cat 3 movie, if they would have done Ebola Syndrome or Untold Story or something along those lines, or even a retro rated one like Seating of a Ghost, it would have been nastier. It would have been more twisted. But it's just the subject matter and how it handles it. I think is it handles it very seriously and very well done. But the subject matter is dark, and they show what they have to show, and they don't hold back. But I think that's enough to bother people. But I think that Dumplings is a great short, fantastic short, honestly. What was the next one that comes on here? Is it it's the Park Chan-wook one, and this one's really good too. I mean, fantastic director. What can I say? I Saw the Devil, right? Geez, wait. Am I getting mixed up? No. He did. What am I mixing up? I Saw the Devil. Oh boy. No, the other guy did Tale of Two Sisters from 3. I sometimes I mix up Park Chan. Oh boy. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm mixing everything up. He did Old Boy and Lady Vengeance and Stoker and all that kind of stuff like that. And fantastic director. One of the best of his time. So it was kind of amazing that he's even in this. And they were lucky to get that one too. So get him in here. His is really kind of cool. We have this director and we see him on set kind of making this vampire film, and we see this elaborate set, and he's talking to everybody. He seems like a genuinely good guy, incredibly busy, hardworking. And he ends up getting home, and what has happened is somebody has tied up his wife. She's a piano player, and he is basically making him play this twisted game that he has to keep doing these awful things, and we kind of learn who this guy is and why he chose him, and all that stuff is really fun and unfolds really well. And I don't want to spoil that because I think that's kind of the cool part about it. But the guy has to kind of turn a little bit evil and show a bad side to even get further in life and save his wife. I mean, this one is not further in life, but further in this game that this guy wants to play. It has some good special effects. The set design's fantastic, and it's really captivating. It keeps your interest. It's well made. It's well acted. Really good, solid short as well. The final one here is Box by Takashi Miike. And this one is definitely probably the most artsy-fartsy, I would say, in a certain extent. It's shot really, it's beautifully shot. A lot of snow, a lot of, kind of, I would say visual kind of moments that are supposed to be like, exposition and visual stuff. And I think this one is, a story where somebody has haunted by something that happened in the past and they kind of revisit it and all that kind of stuff like that. Visually, there's a couple moments in here that are haunting as hell when somebody's in a box, about these kind of circus performers and jealousy and all that kind of thing like that. The kind of performance and stuff works perfect for a horror film. But I don't want to spoil anything about this one either because the ending is quite twisted and crazy and weird, but I think this one is probably the hardest to understand. For me it was. I think visually it looks fantastic, being so cold and creepy and going back in time like that, and I think that the ending is great. I think this would have worked as a feature. I think all of these probably would work as features, maybe besides Park Chan-wook's probably wouldn't have worked as a feature. I can't, I think that would have just been a little drawn out, turning more like torture porny than it should have been if it was a feature. But the one thing that struck me about this one is when we get to the special features on the three extremes. And I'll talk about it a little bit on the last short here. We have commentary by Box by director Takashi Miike, Cross-Pollination Horror Part 2. Of course, he kind of dives in and talks a little bit more about this one being made and all that kind of stuff like that. How lucky he was to get Park Chan-wook. Cooking Dumplings, a brand new interview with Dumplings director Fruit Chan. And he, again, it's like 42 minutes long. He talks about, casting and all that kind of stuff like that and making the short and long version of it something a little more beautiful. Brand new interview with Takashi Miike. And this is like 17 minutes, I think, and this is beautiful. It just shows how humble Takashi Miike is and how he says the movie, he says something about, I don't have the patience to take all these little beautiful details like that and give them to you. I'm not that person, but I can take everybody's little beautiful things like that and put it together and make it entertaining. And I think there's skill in that, and I think that's not quite so easy. And it was just so, I don't know, it was a breath of fresh air to hear a director talk like that, to talk like humble but also intelligent and understand his hardships while making films, and then talking about sometimes making these short films that take risk because he feels more into them, like he said, Visitor Q and things like that, and Imprint. And it was nice to see him say, I never was afraid of small movies because I see a lot of people come up to me and say how much Visitor Q was a favorite of theirs, and I understand that there can be something impactful in a small movie too. And I just thought it was a wonderful interview with the guy, and eye-opening, to be honest. And it reminded me a lot of the Shinya Tsukamoto interviews, and I immediately walked away from it thinking, wow, Shinya Tsukamoto is a very intelligent and likable, commemorable man, honestly. And I felt the same way about Takashi Miike. Taste, Taboo, and Truth, a newly edited interview with Fruit Chan. Filmed in 2004. More Than Skin Deep, a newly edited interview with Dumpling star Bei Ling. Did I mix this up? I'm thinking, no, I talked about that. Filmed in 2005, making a featurettes for each segment. See, I'm doing 3 anthologies this week, and when you do so many different stories, it kind of fries your brain. Trailers for 3 Extremes and the feature-length version of Dumplings. Really wish we had Dumplings on here, but they look great, they sound great, and they're both together, so that's nice. And the 3 Extremes, yeah, nice, cool cover, too. I think all are represented to a certain extent. Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, all of them are on there, all 6. But good stuff. Okay, we're going to end our Dai Gothic Volume 2 here with The Ghost of Kasane Swamp. And this has a different title as well. This is the Masure's Curse, but I like this title better. This fits more with the traditional legend ghost story. 1970, one I missed for 1970. I don't know if it was widely available when we covered 1970. But as is with the Japanese ghost stories, there's a handful that have been done numerous times, like The Ghost of Yasuda, which I've seen like 4 or 5 times now, and and I like that story a lot. And this is another one here, which has a lot of similarities to it, I would say, to a certain extent. But this is a crazy story with a lot of elaborate characters. Now, if I were to break it down and say, I think that I would have a harder time writing this and explaining this story to someone than instead of them just watching it, if that makes any sense. But what we have here is this kind of a retainer to what is it? A retainer to I can't think of what it is. He's just a shogun, a ronin, kind of ronin, a samurai traveling retainer, and he's just an overall piece of crap. He has a wife, but he sleeps with the maid all the time. He's the actor who always plays a villain. He plays a villain in almost all the shinobi movies. He's just kind of a goon, a lot of goonies in so many of these movies. He's actually in the first one in this set as well, The Demons of Mount Oin, as kind of a goon who was killed. So this story folds where we have this blind masseur who is rich and he loans people money, but he's not a great guy either. He has 2 daughters that he doesn't loan money. He's just, everybody in this movie's awful. And they say so in the special features. And I thought that I was like, almost everybody in this film is a piece of crap. They are all terrible people. And which I find kind of fun in a ghost story, because that's kind of, everybody's just going to get their just desserts. So this guy ends up kind of tricking this blind masseur. He says, basically, I don't have the money, but you can take it out of my wife, if you know what I mean. So he's like, okay, I'm going to go have sex with your wife, and he's of a higher importance than this masseur, so he comes in, kills his wife, kills the blind masseur, and basically he's going to get rid of their bodies in the swamp. But what happens is shortly after he does that, he is immediately haunted by the 2 people that he's murdered, and he kind of commits suicide. Cops come into the area and enter his son, who basically badgers the maid because they stole the masseur's money, and he steals that money from her, and he also turns out to be a piece of crap. 2 goons that were involved with hiding the bodies also know the son, so they all get involved with this, and this is where things get complicated, to where we have these elaborate revenge stories that people don't know who they're sleeping with or what happens to them, and it's very tragic and sad, and there's really only one likable character in the entire, a sympathetic character in the entire movie, but the bodies start to pile up to ridiculous levels, and to the point where we have all these people falling in love. We have the classic story of a woman who's completely disfigured and then left because of her beauty is no longer somewhere. We have people sleeping with people they don't know who they are, and feeling horrible about it. But this one's really great, looks fantastic, sounds fantastic, just a really good story that's really well shot. And I imagine this one in DVD and VHS, if there ever was a VHS in the States, I highly doubt it, looked probably dark, because this is a dark film, and I think that Blu-ray probably brings this out. You can see actually what the fuck's going on and the darkness and things like that. But yeah, it's a ghost story, it's a tragedy, and it's elaborate in the terms of all the characters and who their parts are and everything like that. But it's great. It's a really good one, really strong one, and has some pretty dark moments too for the time, and it's actually kind of sexy too. And they talk about that in the special features, kind of sexy, like I said. And this was kind of when like Dai at the time was on the downfall. They were kind of dying, and they made this with a co-production with another company, and they only really made a couple like that. And this was at the same time that the Katsu erotic films were taking off, so Dai was trying to compete with that and add some more sexiness in there. So their next couple films were more oriented at sexy stuff, but this stuff was more into the erotic too. So some of the sex scenes are a little bit more elaborate. And they mentioned this director actually did this version in 1960 for Dai, and it was a lot different. So that's interesting as well, that the directors sometimes make 2-3 versions of the same movie. It's not unlike the director who made the one for 1982, Woman of Fire. He's made that was the 3rd time he made that movie in Korea. So oftentimes directors do kind of tackle the subject matter more than once. And when you have these classic stories like this in Asian cinema and folklore and mythology and stuff, it's not often that you'll do the same story 2 or 3 times, apparently, for the same company even. But yeah, the Ghost of Kasane, I have trouble saying that, Kasane Swamp. I heard it a million times, but then when I go to say it, it's like, it always mixes me up. So we have select scene audio commentary by horror film scholar Lindsay Nelson, new interview with J horror filmmaker Nori, that would be Sukaruda, 18 minutes, and Legacy of Ghosts, a visual essay by Japanese ghost story scholar Zach Davidson, 12 minutes. So I've watched all the features, and I'm repeating a lot of the stuff they said. I don't know what came to what, but great set so far. So it's pretty much over now, but boy, how do I rate these? I probably would put this as my favorite. By far, my favorite is this one. It's the more contemporary story. It's the story I like better. It's the just dessert story, and I think it has the better ending, the better characters, I don't necessarily think that. Yeah, I do think it's better acted than the first one. The first one's from a different time. It's a different style of acting. This is more serious, darker, more grounded. I think this is my favorite. I also think the Haunted Castle visually is one of the better ones, and the other one, the Demon of Mount Oin, is just big and crazy and weird, and doesn't really fit with any of the other ghost stories. But great set, interesting stuff, cool set. The Die Gothic Volume 2. Would recommend picking this up. Okay, we're doing the final disc of the Truth or Dare Legacy, the Tim Ritter films, of course. The original made in 86, and then the sequel made in 94, and I think the third one made in the late 90s. So it was a huge gap between these movies being made when he made Deadly Dares, Truth or Dare Part 4 in 2012. Now, according to the commentary, Tim Ritter basically said this was on Netflix, streaming, and it got the original, and it got a lot of people coming to him and saying, hey, why don't we make another one? It had a lot of traction, so he's figured I'll make another one. And he had a hard bumpy road making this movie, and he tells about it in the commentary and everything like that. So I saw this probably years ago, maybe when it came out even, and I remember being okay with it. Rewatching it, there's a couple things. I think the runtime's a little too long. It's an hour 53 minutes. That's a no-no for me with low budget films. I just want to say that right off the bat. So I was obviously like, oh boy, I don't remember this being this long and drug out. And Jodie Winecoop is not really in it very much, and he's a big staple of the Tim Ritter movies, especially the Truth or Dare movies. The character Dan Hass kind of, he's just kind of the one constant, besides Mike Strauber. So him not being really in it is kind of a downfall. But the concept, and Tim Ritter's always been really good with concepts, especially when it comes to his sequels like Wicked Games or Screaming for Sanity. Those movies have really excellent concepts. And seeing the way that the world was in 2012, predicting this early kind of thing here, is he has this internet, basically, Mikey's Truth or Dare, which people go on there and they upload Truth or Dares, they Truth or Dare each other, and they do these really messed up things that eventually involve murder. So the whole world's been taken to like going viral. And I'm like, that is a genius idea here to a certain extent. I think it's good. But we follow a character who is dumped by his girlfriend because he won't follow a dare. He loses his job, so he goes to his buddy and he starts getting on this Mikey's Truth or Dare, and he falls kind of for this cam girl that's on there named Jessica Cameron. Not really cam girl, but she kind of lures him in and starts having him do these ridiculous dares to get progressively more crazy and crazy and crazy until it's going to lead him even to Mike Strauber himself. But the dares are kind of very I would say, I don't want to say fake snuff, faux snuff or whatever kind of style, but you get to that point, and he's no stranger to that kind of activity because he did Dirty Cop No Donut in 98 with Jodie Winecoop. So it's kind of cool to a certain extent. The idea, like I said, I love the idea. It's highly intelligent that this stuff does happen, and people exactly use that. It does have the cheating element, the untrustworthy element, the Truth or Dare element. So it's all these elements that fit with the other movie, but without the kind of core group of characters or just Dan Hess or somebody like that. It doesn't necessarily feel like it fits as well as the other ones. And I know that when we talk about 5, we'll talk a little bit about that more. So at the end of it, this was my least favorite of the Truth or Dare films, and it's probably just the runtime. And so we're seeing a lot of the movie is big chunks of other people's doing their Truth or Dares, and this is a lot of fans, a lot of people that aren't actors or actresses or anything like that making their own stuff, and they trail on a little long. There's some digital effects that do not hold up, and maybe they never were really good there either. But all that stuff just goes on too long, and every once in a while you'll have a good performance in those, but for the most part they're not really up to snuff with a film on there. For that, I just, it's not as entertaining as some of the other ones. As far as the features go on this one, I'm going to have to remember these off my mind because they're not all there, but there's a commentary by Tim Ritter, and he does show some of the behind the scenes archival stuff. There's a feature on here too. But the way he talks, it seems like he put in a lot of work, and he didn't get, people, that's the one thing I noticed about indie filmmakers or fans in general is, oh, you should make this, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this, and people bombard them, and then they do that, and they don't show up to support. But the one thing about Ritter's movies is you could tell that he loves the fans, and he puts them in his movies, and he has them partake in it. And he's definitely a really genuinely nice guy. I remember corresponding him early days when I was doing this channel, and I covered all his films, and I asked where I could get original Twisted Illusions just to watch the original version and everything like that. And I bought a VHS tape off him for dirt cheap, and he sent a bunch of extras and stuff. This was years ago. It's probably 10, 15 years ago, but just a gem genuinely great guy. He helps other people, supports other people. He's just a very supportive indie filmmaker. So I understand why he puts all these kind of people in the movies and stuff like that. But a lot of times I always felt like having a lot of, people that aren't really actors in the movies kind of can bog it down to a certain extent, and the performances are all over the place. And I think Jessica Cameron does a decent job. The lead guy does okay. But, there's always been a totally weird kind of comedic stuff in the Truth or Dare movies. So that's no different. That's kind of always been in there, even from the first movie, intentionally, unintentionally. It's just kind of a mixture of all of them. And Wicked Games, like eating the sandwich when he's going after the girl. So that's always been there. So I can understand that. So you're either going to be in it or out of it. It is HD now, finally. The original version was standard def. So if you're interested in the 4 Truth or Dare, check it out. I mean, ranking them, 2's my favorite, then I'm 1, and then probably 3, then maybe 5, and then 4. Maybe 4, 5 is actually better than 3. I don't know. I have to think about it. But yeah, that's Truth or Dare 4. Deadly Dares, Truth or Dare 4. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about Part 5, I Dared You, Truth or Dare 5. This is a co-production or co-direction with Scott Tepperman, who made stuff like The Hospital. He's involved in those movies and a bunch of other stuff, and Tim Ritter, of course. So Scott Tepperman, he talks about meeting Tim Ritter at a convention. There's a commentaries on here, and he talks about how much he was a big fan of the Truth or Dare films. They correspond a little bit when he met him, and then I guess they got closer, and Tim Ritter said, you know what, why don't you come and be in the movie and co-direct it with me? And they filmed this over 3 states, 3 different states, I think Illinois, Kentucky, I believe, and Florida, of course, where Ritter was originally from Florida, then he moved to Kentucky, so it's all a mixture, and I think Scott Tepperman is from Florida, so got all these people there. You got some Gator Blade is involved with this movie as well, and Jim O'Rear. So it's a good mixture of indie filmmakers from all around the different areas and things like that. So Dan Hess is back, Joel D. Wynkoop, who's my favorite part of these movies. I think Joel D. Wynkoop, King of the B movies, is one of the most. He gives you so much. I've always enjoyed him. I think he's a great guy, tremendous energy, and just always turns in entertaining performances. So Dan Hess is back, and he's the main star of this one. And the first half kind of follows, and I like this one, fits really well with, how the Truth or Dare movies all go back to the original Mike Strauber murder and the effects that murder have on people and the loss and stuff like that. That was always something smart about his Ritter's the Truth or Dare films, is that this one killing spree really shows how this whole town of Sunnyvale was affected by everything, and how many people died and how many people are upset about it. And that became kind of the main driving force behind the Truth or Dare movies, and this one's no different. So Scott Tepperman's character is actually one of the characters who was mauled in the first film. I won't tell you who, but it's not going to be very hard when you realize his name is Chainsaw Dax. But the Mikey Truth or Dare is still going on, and he kind of meets this girl on there, and he's having trouble, relationship problems and all that kind of stuff like that. Jim O'Rear is his doctor. And before long, Dan Hess is involved, and Jim O'Rear and all these people have kind of a history with Dan Hess, and Dan Hess is put up to the test by Chainsaw Dax because they kidnap his wife, that he has to commit all these Truth or Dares, and if he doesn't, his wife dies. It's very kind of like one of those movies. There's one where it's like, commit this before this time, or or this will blow up kind of deal. There's a lot of those movies like that, but what we have is Dan Hess kind of running around doing all these dares in the Sunnyvale world, and he has to shoot heroin and burn down a house, and it's just Joel D. Wynkoop at his most crazy and loud. This one is very low budget. Sometimes the audio will peak, that kind of stuff like that. The acting ranges, you'll see cameos by people like Bob Glazer and other people that you'll recognize from the Sleazebox movies or the Gator Blade movies and stuff like that. So if you're familiar with indie films, you'll recognize a bunch of people too. Jim O'Rear, Scott Tepperman. Like I said, there's a lot of people in these movies, in this movie. But so I think that second part, and they say so in the commentary as well, they like that second part better, with Joel D. having to do all this kind of stuff to save his wife. I think it works better. I think it's crazier. I think the idea there, sometimes the acting is not perfect. Sometimes the shots aren't perfect. The editing is a very low budget movie, and they do, Tepperman admits he just is early in his career. He's only been making movies for a few years after that. So at this point, so there's a lot of, shortcomings of it, but I think that conceptually, I think it's smart about it. I think that the way they handle it is very Truth or Dare. Tepperman seems like a big fan of the films, and his story, I would suggest it is, and Joel D. Wynkoop's really good in it and fun in it, and has a good fight scene at the very end, kind of a nice little dramatic touch here. At the end, and they use an old institution, a house that was turned into a hospital, this old building, which I think was kind of cool. But overall, I think, I do like I Dared You a little bit better than Part 4. I think 4 is the weakest for me personally. But yeah, so like I said, this one has budget constraints. But if you're a big fan of the Truth or Dare series, I'd say why not check out Part 5. This has a bunch of features on here, including 2 different commentaries, one by Joel D. Wynkoop and his wife, one by Catherine Wynkoop, and then we have Scott Tepperman doing his own commentary as well with Jim O'Rear. And then we have other features as well. Scott Tepperman, I think, shot a new 10-minute interview or so for this opening, and he talks about, this movie not really getting a lot of releases at the time in 2017, 2018. So he's like, hopefully, more people get to visit it, and they think he did a pretty good job with it, mixing it in and stuff. And I would agree, it does surpass the 4th one in that aspect. And also there is a 30-minute film on here about Dan Hess, entitled Dan Hess. I can't remember the director of this one, but it's Tim Ritter's Dan Hess. Tim Ritter wrote it, and this is basically Joel D. Wynkoop as Dan Hess going to get a job, and some people run into him, and he has this kind of big fight in this hospital. It's fun. Some of the acting's bad. There's one part in here where the audio goes out of sync, and it's like a blurb, and in the commentary, the director says, "Man, that should have been fixed. It should be fixed on the version you're watching. It is not." So it's a little hit on it, but overall, the Truth or Dare series, I would say that you should watch the first 2 at the very least. Why not watch the first 3? And if you like them, go further than that. Watch all of them. But yeah, this is the Truth or Dare series, 1986 to 2017. Cool cover there. Gotta like Mike Strauber. I do think that if you do another one, you should bring back Mike Strauber. Mike Strauber's got to be the killer. You got to seal the deal. You got to end the Truth or Dare legacy. If you bring back one more time, he's got to be in there. But yeah, I mean, he's always in there to a certain extent, but he's not really the killer upper anymore. But yeah. All right, we're going to talk about some 1983 movies. I'll be relatively quick with this one here. Yeah, this is Screamtime. That's right, from Lightning Video here. I have old VHS of Screamtime. Love the cover. This is definitely something that would bring my attention in 1983, like I was there. But as a kid, I'd see it and be like, what is that? Kind of like Fright Time. What was that one? Fright Show or Fright Time? It was another anthology, but those were just a bunch of shorts thrown together. Kind of like this one. So Michael Armstrong, the writer, director of Mark of the Devil, also the writer of House of Long Shadows from 83, actually directed this one under a pseudonym, but he's casted as a screenplay guy. So it looks like we have 3 shorts that he made or something, kind of cobbled together, British shorts, and then we did an American wraparound in here that has this whole video store tie-in where a couple crooks go in there and steal a few VHSs at random, and then they're going to go to this girl's house that they know, who maybe a working girl, I don't know, and they're going to watch these crummy horror movies and get and eventually have a little twist at the end. The first one here, I think, is the best story of the bunch, and it follows this puppet guy, this old man who has a wife, and they don't really get along very well. There's a son who's an absolute piece of shit, kind of angry, crazy kid, and this guy goes to the beach side and does these puppet shows with, I can't remember the puppet's name, Punch and Judy, I think, are the puppets, and everybody watches, and I guess they enjoy it, but his son hates him, his stepson. His wife hates him, so one day the stepson kind of destroys or tries to destroy the puppets, burns them down in front of everybody. Real sociopathic behavior. And, of course, the puppets come to life. Or do they? We don't know. I won't tell you. But some people end up getting killed. And one scene, I think one of the kills is really kind of well done. The point of view kill is well done, and they use the point of view for a good reason. But the point of view kill is pretty well done. It reminds me of kind of the deaths in Rob Zombie's Halloween in the opening with the kid. I know it's not as gratuitous as that, but the idea that, I think Rob Zombie, say what you want about him, he did film deaths pretty well, or pretty cruelly, if you will. But I do think that death in there kind of has a little sense of realism where they keep beating the kid with the thing, although it's absolutely ridiculous because it's supposedly, maybe, possibly puppet. But I think this one's probably the best. The next one here is Dream Home. And this is kind of like your standard gaslighting, haunted house. Am I crazy? No. Are you crazy? Is somebody doing this to me kind of house? She goes in this house and weird things start to happen. Some bloody things here and there. Is there a mad killer? Is there a ghost in a house? Is there something along those lines? Is it a premonition? You don't know. I don't know. Who gives a shit? But the ending is twist. There's a twist at the end, and there's some gore, a neck, throat slash, and I was like, oh, that's pretty gory. And every once in a while, all 3 of these are like, oh, there's a nasty gore scene in there that's slightly, above what I expected to see in here. But this second story is probably my least favorite. Just kind of a boring gaslighting haunted house story. It doesn't do much for me, but hey. And then the final story here is Do You Believe in Fairies, which is the funniest title for one of these shorts in here. And this is about kind of a criminal guy who looks in the ads and they're paying really well to kind of garden this house. He's like, I'll go there, and it's just 2 old ladies who are very bizarre and tell him this weird story about fairies in the yard and these paintings on the wall. This guy, of course, being a no-good piece of poopy, is going to steal some stuff from these poor old ladies, and of course the fairies and the weird paintings on the walls are going to come to life, and just desserts will be served. The wraparound ends opens with a ridiculous, things coming out of the VHS. Now we see where they got the ring from. Ring ripped off Screamtime. But anyways, coming out of the VHSs. Or maybe Video Dead ripped this off too. But they got some lawsuits. But regardless, they get killed by the tapes, whatnot. They definitely squeeze in some nudity with the wraparound. I don't know why, but maybe that's what the distributor and Lightning Video wanted. I don't know. But good old Lightning Video here. This is such an old tape, man. 83 Screamtime. Please rewind or pay rewind fee of $2. This is a Blockbuster tape. I don't remember where I got this. I have this twice. I have 2 of these for some reason, but it's just one of the things you kind of accumulate over the years. But yeah, Screamtime, not great. But maybe the only anthology from this year off the top of my head from 83. But hey, it's a British horror film, which is kind of rare from 83. But yeah, we're moving through the 83s. Okay, next up is The Great Bear Scare, and it's around Halloween, so why not watch The Great Bear Scare, this little kid's movie. It was based on a kid's book, and I remember the VHS cover. It was one that I rented as a kid all the time, because when you're like 3 or 4, you go to the family section, you see little monsters. I want to rent The Great Bear Scare. You can rent anything from the family set when you're 3 or 4, and then you move up to PG or whatever your mom wants to let you rent. But The Great Bear Scare was something I used to rent as a kid. I put it in, and I was like, I don't remember this at all. And I love the cover art. It's got Frankenstein, a Wolfman, a Dracula on there. Really, Dracula and the witch and stuff are really kind of the only main driving forces here. But we kind of follow the story where I guess it's a whole town of bears, and there's a giant monster mountain or some shit over there. Like it's a Grayskull or Snake Mountain or some shit right over the hills, and they're like, I guess rumor is there's gonna be a bunch I'm just doing these bears voices, whatever the fuck I want, I guess. Rumor is there's gonna be a bunch of monsters that come down here one night. So everybody's like, that's terrifying, let's all hide in our little houses in our bear community. But bear community sounds weird, but hey, who knows what kind of bear community there could be. But so they kind of basically send Teddy Bear. My name sounds really punny, but I can't put my finger on it. Teddy Bear to the monster mountain to check it out. He's kind of volunteered from the towns, and he's going to go there and kind of see the monsters, and he meets Dracula, and Dracula's a buffoon. But Dracula is going to be like kind of this general that wants to send all the monsters there. I don't know what they're doing. Are they trying to get people to fear? But Teddy Bear is played by, I think it's Tom Smothers plays Teddy Bear's voice. He's in Pandemonium. He's a comedian. I'm not as familiar with him as I should be, but I do know some things like that. So he goes up there and he has this weird muddled things like, monsters aren't scary, let's up. I don't know what he's talking about, but anyways, he finds them kind of funny. The monsters don't care, they're going to attack anyways, and all the bears kind of laugh at them and whatnot, kind of suck away their power, and it's kind of like Ernest Scared Stupid, but Ernest Scared Stupid's great. This is just kind of weird and muddled, but it's okay. It's a kid's movie. The animation's not great, but it's not the worst you've ever seen, but it is unintentionally funny at times because there's tons and tons of monsters in here, and they just look ridiculous. They're like blobs of cheapness. They're like, and there's just all sorts of things that you just think, is that a werewolf? There's a Frankenstein. There's just a mummy, and a lot of them are just like, that's Uncle Fester after he fell in toxic waste. All sorts of weird things like that. It's a cute kids movie. It's the worst thing you've ever seen? Absolutely not. It's the best thing you've ever seen? Maybe. If you've been locked in a cave, if you've been locked in Monster Mountain, maybe it is the best thing you've ever seen. But The Great Bear Scare, hey, it is what it is. I watch everything, and I realize I'm not going to watch all the shorts at the end. I'm going to mix them in. I'm going to mix in the quality, so I don't want to be stuck with all the great ones done and watched in the beginning, and I'm watching, like Turd Burger from, Pakistan or some random country that they're the only horror movie they ever made, and they had to cut everything out, so it's 2 hours of toilet. I don't want to get stuck watching those all at the end. So The Great Bear Scare, fun, entertaining little kids movie. And there's the books, of course, that I think people would probably remember. I definitely remembered them when I saw this cover. I was like, oh, yeah. That's vague in my mind. Okay, the Patreon pick is Car Wash. And I'm not super familiar with this movie. I'd seen it around, and of course the cover, all over the cover had, Richard Pryor and George Carlin on it, 2 big comedians at the time in the 80s. And I was like, okay, this is going to be their deal, or I had really no idea what it was. It's written by Joel Schumacher, which is kind of wild. And they're kind of cameos. Richard Pryor and George Carlin are cameos. This follows kind of a black kind of operated car wash. Everything's done by hand. There's tons of recognizable people in there. Antonio Fargas is in here as kind of like a trans character, which is pretty early on for that, in film, I guess, in this kind of film. And a lot of people actually treat them well. It's not like the blunt of every single joke in here. Bill Duke is in here as someone that's kind of struggling with, radicalism and stuff, like being radicalized and whatnot, and turning to a life of crime and maybe like that kind of deal. And there's other people in here too. The lead guy is an actor that I recognize, and there's tons of side characters and a lot of fun to be had, and characters doing certain things and having side stories, and there are tons of them are introduced to. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a dozen characters, a lot of good actors, like I said, in here that are in here. But the main driving force, there's comedy to be had with all the characters, but the main driving force, the emotional forces between Bill Duke and the main character here, of trying to kind of save this guy and steer this young man on the right path. Bill Duke's an excellent actor. I've always loved him, ever since I was a kid and saw him in Predator and Commando. You're like, oh, that guy's awesome. But every time he pops up, it's always a pleasure, from Menace to Society to Mandy. He's just a very good actor, has great screen presence, and he's a good director too. So I mean, he's made his own movies. I think he directed Hoodlum and Deep Cover, which I've not seen, but Hoodlum is a great movie. I know Deep Cover is supposed to be even better. But So like, this movie is well acted, and it's not your typical, comedy film from nowadays where it's like, hey, it's all over the top laughter and improv and stuff like that. This is like a scripted film that's not overly laugh out loud funny, but more so just has quirky, silly characters, and there's a lot of drama in here to be had as well. There's, of course, fun and goofiness and silliness and kind of outrageous moments, but it's definitely a comedy of the 80s that's more story driven at certain points than anything else. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't love it. And like the George Carlin stuff, I think that a lot of people will probably like that, and the Richard Pryor stuff, but I thought that was okay stuff, and I am a Richard Pryor fan. I mean, I love him in Blue Collar. Is a great movie with 3 great performances at the center of it. But this is definitely just a little cameo and stuff, and he's great in his comedy too, stuff like See No Evil, Hear No Evil. But I thought Car Wash was interesting, different too. I don't want to compare it to Used Cars, because I think like Used Cars is more laugh out loud, but it has some of that kind of stuff in there too. And Used Cars is more like bigger, I think, of a film, but I think it's a nice little slice and a look at a movie like this, which I wouldn't call it blaxploitation exactly, but I'm sure it's driven at that point to a certain extent. But it's not like just a subject or anything like that would be typically that kind of movie. But then again, that's not necessarily what blaxploitation movies are. They're not necessarily exploitation. It's just to put that idea that it gets a lot of black audience to go see the film, and I imagine this movie did that pretty well. But enjoyable, different, nice little change of pace here. But I would recommend checking it out if it sounds like it's up your alley. Great cast, some good moments in here too, some good dialogue, and memorable as well. And there is laugh out loud moments, but it's more that kind of stuff that the more you see it, the more funny it is to you, the more repeating it with other people, if that makes sense. Questions, comments, concerns, all that jazz. Martin VP gives me a thumbs up. Thank you, buddy. And then we have Ken Coakley. Let me take a sip of this first. It's crack. Liquid crack. No, it's coffee. But, like you guys didn't believe me. Ken Coakley. I saw Deathline at... Stop squeaking, chair. I saw Deathline at my local cinema a few years ago. The director, Gary Sherman, was the screening. He mentioned hating the U.S. title Raw Meat. I knew the film was Raw Meat for a very long time. The projectionist that I worked with in the 80s had a Raw Meat poster as part of his 500-plus tapestry of posters that adorned the huge projection room. I got to have a brief chat with Mr. Sherman after the film. I told him about David Ladd's brief appearance in the British action film The Wild Geese as a drug dealer that Roger Moore forces to eat an entire bag of heroin. Yummy. Ladd is the half-brother of Alan Ladd Jr. They're both sons of screen legend Alan Ladd, who produced this, I believe. Donald Pleasance was brilliant as a slightly tapped detective, while Norman Rossington did a good job playing his partner, who tries not to laugh during the times when Pleasance does something hilarious. Rossington was also in A Night to Remember, The Longest Day, and appeared as the Beatles manager in A Hardest Day Night. Christopher Lee had a great cameo as well. Yeah, Lee's cameo was the stuff of legend. The movie was more violent than I remembered. It was like a mixture of Chud, Hills Have Eyes, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. For sure. That's a good comparison. It definitely has some Chud and those movies in there too. Beyond Sour Ground, just to clarify, I said I do recall Necromantic 2 being vastly superior over the original, or if that isn't how I said it, it's what I meant. Okay. I was eating while listening to this video, and when it got to the part where you said a region-free player is only about $100 to $150, you probably spend that much on movies every 2 weeks. I nearly spit out my food on unexpected, instantaneous laughter. Talk about knowing your audience. LOL, I do remember the region-free or Get Out attitude from back in the 2000s. I was so busy keeping up with Region 1A stuff that it didn't matter to me at the time, but now that we are living in the future, there's only so many more movies we could say. Someone will put that out someday, or I bet someone's working on that one. Most of the stuff that's chronically unavailable at this point, there's a reason. Chronically, what is it? Yeah. It's so weird to me that Chuck Russell remade a Kevin Tenney movie. If anything, you'd think Kevin Tenney would be remaking a Chuck Russell movie. What's next? A Michael Mann remake of Ghoulies? No, Ghoulies go to college. But no, yeah, you're right. Like now though, with the importing stuff, it's a little bit more expensive. So maybe it's not worth getting the thing. I already have it, and I can't. Obviously, I have so much region. If you like, and also if you're into special features, different special features, you want that region free. But yeah, I'm definitely all region free. I'm all region, baby. What the flick, dude? I wish like a motherfucker that I could go to the Cinema Wasteland. The Toxic Avenger is one of my all top 3 favorite movies. Yeah, there's a Toxic Avenger reunion. Of course, Nick from Flanders 59. I adore Deathline, aka Raw Meat, though it does give one pause before boarding the subway late at night, right? You know what? I've never been on the subway. Toledo does not have one. I'm sure Mr. Harworth and Mr. Thompson have loads to tell us what was previously unaware of, so I'll have the upgrade. First heard about the gem while someone pointed out that the 2008 splatter flick Stag Night, featuring Vanessa Shaw, Kit Purdue, and Breckenmeyer, was somewhat of a Raw Meat ripoff, as a favorite peeps getting stuck on the side with cannibalistic mole people. I actually have a DVD of Stag Night here. I never saw it. Screenwriter Peter Ray Dowling is a Brit living in the U.S. who grew up watching 70s horror, and his favorite thespians are Sir Christopher Lee and Donald Pleasance. Total coincidence, right? Yeah, right. Thanks yet again for reviewing a film I've seen multiple times. You always provide a fresh perspective that allows me to appreciate a feature more or point out weaknesses I was previously blind to. I stumbled on Cornered on DVD sale years ago. At first, I didn't even know the director was Belgium. Either did I until you told me. As you know, Belgian horror flicks are few and far between, so when one is made, it always piques my interest. While it wasn't my favorite Belgium scary movie, that will always be Daughters of Darkness. Great movie. Either I quite like it. Steve Guttenberg and James Duvall are clearly the most experienced of the cast, and the rest has left the business, it would appear. Questions. Do you believe that Belgium director Daniel Mays portrayed a typical U.S. store and his customers correctly, or did it drop the ball? I mean, most of the characters are just the foods they're eating, so they're very one-dimensional. I would say, the guy gambling the Mexican store owner, I think that he has a little bit more dimension to him and whatnot. I mean, at the very, thin veil, I think that they are okay, but I don't think they're, some deep, characters. I don't think every store is going to have that, but also I don't go into, isn't really, consider that even, a cheap little bodega. I'm not sure, so I'm not familiar. I don't stay out at the fucking stores like that and talk to these guys, so maybe it is accurate. Are there urban legends in the US of A that are similar to the Raw Meat backstory? I mean, the Donner Party, right? The Donner Party is most definitely, and the joke that there's alligators in the New York sewer system. So those could both be kind of in that aspect. But how exhausted were you after completing your last year in review, which is stellar, by the way? All work and no play makes Dave a dull boy, right? Well, my issue with it was, so I'm loading 300, 400 different sources from material, and Adobe Premiere does not like all that. So it's like, oh, this is crashing, freezing, and it would freeze, and it took me forever from the freezing and the crashing. And then when you render it, you're dropping frames here and there, so therefore you have to cut it up and render little bits and pieces at a time, and then plug those back into the video. So it took a lot longer than it should have. Honestly, if it went smooth, I'm kind of a workhorse when it comes to that stuff. I could have done it in a week, just straight editing or stuff like that, but since it kept dropping and stuff and I had to figure stuff out, I'm using a new version of Adobe Premiere, which I'm not super familiar with, so I was using the old version, now I'm using the new version, so I had to learn and stuff too. So it was a lot more learning curve than I do, and my editing is not top notch. I'm not using a lot of special transitions or zoom ins or anything like that. It's very primitive editing, but I feel like the primitive editing works for that. Maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Till next show, God willing, and mind those doors, young man. Bumpus Hounds ruins ruined dinner. Where did that go to die is unforgettable. I think the primitive animation really added to the uncomfortable experience. The combination of the weird animation and the horrific content is brilliant, like something you'd see on Adult Swim in an alternate universe. I agree. I remember the movie actually making me feel queasy. Me too, which I love because it's such a rarity to be physically affected by a film. The film deserves a mention among all-time disturbing all-timers. The movie is powerful, and it fucks with me. Thanos Infinity sounds like Gary Sherman took the theme from Deathline from the Scottish folklore tale about Sawney Bean and his cannibal family. He did. He mentions that. I'm not sure, but I think another AKA for the movie was Night Murder's Meat Train. Maybe. I never heard that one. Scrammer Claus. Oh, Jimmy Scrammer Claus. Nice. Thanks for covering mixed up. Hope you're doing good. I am doing good, Jimmy. I hope you're doing good too. I met Jimmy a couple times at Wasteland. Super good guy, cool guy. He's immensely talented. Again, seems like he's a very busy worker. Death Rattle, I thought him was absolutely terrible. You're not the only one. Most people thought it was terrible. I liked it. I'm not being like, it's a masterpiece and you're all wrong. I was just like, that was kind of weird and bizarre and sloppy, but enjoyable. That's what I'm looking at him for. I mean, and in a year full of sloppy storytelling, him is not the most guilty of it, and it's not being praised as like a masterpiece either. So that maybe I reflect on it a little kinder. If that makes any sense. But I get it; it's not for everybody. There's a couple bits at the end where I'm like, what the fuck are you doing there? But audio love, happy spooky season. Night of the Demons is great, but I've always had an affinity for Witchboard. For it to be Tenny's first film and with limited budget, it was really well executed and highly effective, and it used to scare the hell out of me as a kid. That being said, I'm not sure I'm ready or willing to see this new one. Sidebar: not familiar with Steve Guttenberg? Blasphemous. Very funny. I am familiar with the guy. It's just like, yes, I've seen like a handful of his movies, like the Police Academy movies and stuff, Three Men and a Baby, but it's not like if you were to tell me name 5 Steve Guttenberg movies, like on the top of my head, I most likely couldn't. I'm just not an actor that I followed, or maybe he's just so... I don't say this. He did fine in that Quarter movie. He does fine every time I see him. He's a blank slate to me. He doesn't resonate with my head. You know what I mean? He's not a guy. He's not one of my guys, you know? It's not like a Warren Oates or a Ben Johnson or even like a Nicolas Cage where I'll remember that person for a long time. Like him, don't like him, indifferent. You know, it's just he's not bad. He's just a guy to me. He's just there. Stephen Cowie, Where the Dead Go to Die, hug. A mate just appeared with it one day. It's crazy movie. And Way Up Dude gives me a thumbs up and everything like that. I appreciate it. And I'm not mad you call me. It's very funny that you called me out for the Steve Guttenberg thing. Like, it is true, though. Like, I've got way too close to the damn thing right there. I was, like, leaning in on the audio. It's just going to peek out there. Why you should warn me? Thanks a lot. I'm just... I'm in a talkative mood or something today. We're going to do the update. It's a quick update. A couple movies that I just had to have. I had to have them. I couldn't live without them. And these are just two kind of favorites here. Nightmare on Elm Street 4K collection. I got the regular. I don't really care about steelbooks. I get a steelbook if I have to. And apparently they're like releasing these like limited steelbooks, and they're not releasing like standard editions. Like I was waiting on Tombstone. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I wanted the regular standard Tombstone. They only did a limited steelbook on 4K, and then I'm like, where the fuck's Tombstone? I wanted to buy the fucking thing. I don't want a steelbook. But so I did make that mistake a second time. But here's what we have. We have the Nightmare on Elm Street 7 film collection here on 4K. Warner Brothers. We have, of course, Part 1, theatrical uncut, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5, uncut and theatrical. Freddy's Dead, Final Nightmare, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. We have nothing really except 3D glasses for the portion of Freddy's Dead and blood-curdling special features, according to them. Who knows what they are, but I'm sure they're blood-curdling. Yeah, so I'm glad to see these on 4K. I did see the first one, which is basically the in theaters recently. I've seen it a million times, of course, but you know, I think it was the unrated. I'm not 100% sure, but I am a big fan of the first one. I like the second one. I love the third one. I like the fourth one, even though it's incredibly stupid. I never was a huge fan of the fifth one, and it's probably been years since I've seen that unrated version on VHS. I haven't watched the VHS in years. I used to have them, of course, and everything like that. Freddy's Dead, I rewatched when we did 91 for 22 shots, and it did not hold up for me. And New Nightmare is pretty interesting, to be honest, although a bit too long, and isn't quite as good as it was when it came out, but still great to have the first 7 films on 4K. I definitely will get my use out of that box set. And next up is a movie that I adored since the day I saw it. I saw it early on, and this is The Night of the Living Dead, 1990, in 4K, with the uncensored version, which I might just pop in tonight if I'm feeling a little froggy here. I'm very excited. We have the theatrical and uncensored versions of the film, and I guess it's not much longer, just some squibs going off and stuff that we have seen. But I love this movie. Tom Savini did a great job with the remake, and I love Tony Todd in it. I love Tom Tolles in it. Just fantastic job. It's got William Butler in there, but yeah. This movie is embedded in my head forever. I am a huge George Romero fan, and this remake by Savini and company is one of my favorite remakes. My favorite movies are Romero's movies, of course, Night, Dawn, and Day. And also, I'm a huge fan of Return, although it's not Romero, I know. But still, I'm always a zombie guy. I'm a big zombie guy. The Night of the Living Dead 1990 remake is fantastic. Love it. Can't wait to watch the extended cut and whatnot, or the uncensored version. But yeah, let's get the hell out of here. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and as always, have a good one.